Disrespect is a subtle but powerful force that can erode the very foundation of human dignity and self-worth. It often begins in small, almost imperceptible ways: a sarcastic remark, a dismissive gesture, or an interruption in the middle of a conversation. At first glance, these actions may seem trivial, but they carry a deeper message: that you are not worthy of consideration or value. When allowed to persist, disrespect becomes a pattern, one that not only affects how others see you, but more dangerously, how you begin to see yourself. Disrespect is insidious because it targets one's sense of identity. It communicates, implicitly or explicitly, that your thoughts, feelings, and experiences are unimportant. This can come from anyone: a colleague who constantly interrupts you, a friend who makes snide remarks about your choices, or even a family member who belittles your achievements. Over time, these seemingly minor acts accumulate, leading to feelings of inadequacy, self-doubt, and even resentment. It is crucial to recognize this early on, because the acceptance of disrespect is the first step toward the erosion of self. One of the reasons people tolerate disrespect is the fear of conflict. Many believe that standing up for themselves might escalate tensions or damage relationships. This is especially true in cultures or environments that value harmony over confrontation. However, avoiding conflict does not eliminate the problem. It merely buries it under a veneer of superficial peace. Meanwhile, the damage continues, internally manifesting as stress, anxiety, or even depression. It is essential to understand that refusing to accept disrespect is not about seeking conflict, but about maintaining one's dignity and self-respect. Moreover, disrespect is contagious. When one person gets away with disrespectful behavior, it signals to others that such conduct is acceptable. It sets a precedent, leading to a cycle where more people feel entitled to treat you poorly. This is particularly evident in professional settings. If a team leader consistently interrupts one member during meetings, others may begin to do the same, consciously or unconsciously. The effective individual's ideas and contributions gradually become marginalized, not necessarily because they lack merit, but because the culture of disrespect has undermined their voice. Refusing to accept disrespect, therefore, is not merely a matter of personal pride, but also a way to establish boundaries. Boundaries communicate to others how you expect to be treated. They are not walls meant to isolate, but frameworks designed to ensure mutual respect. Establishing boundaries requires clear communication. This could mean directly addressing the behavior, such as saying, I feel disrespected when my ideas are dismissed without consideration, or more subtle actions like maintaining composure and confidently holding your ground. It's about conveying that while you are open to dialogue and differing opinions, you will not tolerate condescension or contempt. It's also important to understand the impact of disrespect on relationships. Disrespect, if left unaddressed, breeds resentment. It creates an emotional distance between people, undermining trust and intimacy. In friendships, it can lead to passive-aggressive behavior, where unspoken grievances manifest in subtle but hurtful ways. In romantic relationships, a pattern of disrespect can erode the very essence of partnership, leading to power imbalances and emotional manipulation. Addressing disrespect is therefore not about attacking the other person, but about safeguarding the relationship from long-term harm. However, it is also necessary to differentiate between genuine disrespect and perceived slights. Not every disagreement or critique is a sign of disrespect. Sometimes our own insecurities or sensitivities can cause us to misinterpret others' words or actions. It is important to approach situations with clarity and self-awareness, ensuring that accusations of disrespect are based on objective behavior rather than subjective feelings. This is where emotional intelligence plays a crucial role, helping to discern intent and context before reacting. Another reason disrespect should never be accepted is its impact on self-identity. When you allow others to consistently treat you with contempt, you start internalizing their behavior. You begin to question your worth and value, leading to a diminished sense of self. This is especially damaging when the disrespect comes from authority figures or loved ones whose opinions you value. Breaking free from this cycle requires courage. Courage to believe in your worth even when others fail to see it. To refuse disrespect is to assert your right to dignity. It is about reclaiming your narrative, ensuring that others do not define your value or capabilities. It is about demanding that your presence, thoughts, and emotions be acknowledged as legitimate and valuable. This doesn't mean becoming arrogant or overly defensive, but cultivating a quiet confidence that commands respect without needing to shout for it. Ultimately, never accepting disrespect is about self-respect. It's about recognizing that while you cannot control how others behave, you can control what you tolerate. It's about choosing to surround yourself with people who uplift you rather than those who diminish you. And most importantly, it's about teaching others how to treat you by the standards you set for yourself. In a world where disrespect is often normalized under the guise of humor, assertiveness, or even love, refusing to accept it is an act of courage and self-preservation. It is a declaration that your dignity is non-negotiable and that you are deserving of respect. Not because of any titles or achievements, but simply because you exist. Manipulation is a covert and calculated form of influence that distorts reality to serve the interests of the manipulator, often at the expense of the person being manipulated. It involves psychological tactics aimed at controlling another person's thoughts, emotions, and actions without their conscious awareness. Unlike open persuasion or honest negotiation, manipulation is deceptive, subtly coercing someone to act in ways they might not have chosen if fully informed. It is a violation of personal autonomy and trust, which makes it particularly insidious and damaging. Manipulation can take many forms, from emotional appeals that play on sympathy to strategic withholding of information to maintain control. It often begins subtly, making it difficult to recognize. A manipulative person might start by offering excessive praise, creating a sense of obligation in the recipient. Later, they may leverage this perceived debt to influence decisions or behaviors. This tactic, known as guilt tripping, is designed to make the other person feel responsible for the manipulator's emotions or circumstances, compelling them to comply out of a sense of duty rather than genuine willingness. Another common tactic is gaslighting, where the manipulator deliberately distorts facts to make the victim doubt their perception of reality. This can be as simple as denying something they clearly said, or as complex as creating elaborate scenarios to confuse the victim. Over time, this erodes the victim's self-confidence and trust in their judgment, making them more reliant on the manipulator for validation. This dependence is exactly what the manipulator seeks, because it ensures a position of power and control. They keenly observe others to identify emotional wounds, insecurities, or unmet needs. Once identified, they use this knowledge to gain leverage. For example, someone who fears abandonment may be manipulated through threats of withdrawal or silent treatment. Similarly, someone seeking approval might be coerced through conditional affection or praise that is granted only when they comply. This targeted exploitation is particularly cruel because it preys on a person's deepest fears and desires. A manipulative person often disguises their intentions under a veneer of concern or affection. They might say, "I'm only doing this because I care about you," or "I know what's best for you," creating an illusion of benevolence while subtly dictating choices. This is especially effective because it not only obscures their selfish motives, but also makes the victim feel guilty for questioning them. By positioning themselves as a caring authority, manipulators effectively silence dissent and maintain control without overt aggression. One of the most damaging aspects of manipulation is its impact on self-worth. When consistently subjected to manipulation, individuals begin to question their instincts, emotions, and decisions. They internalize the manipulator's narrative, leading to self-doubt and confusion. This can be particularly debilitating in close relationships where emotional bonds make it harder to recognize manipulation. A person might rationalize the manipulative behavior as love or concern, further entrenching the cycle of control and dependence. The effects of manipulation are not just psychological, but also behavioral. Individuals who are manipulated repeatedly may find themselves making choices that go against their values or interests, simply to maintain peace or avoid conflict. They may develop people-pleasing tendencies, sacrificing their own needs to gain approval or avoid criticism. This pattern leads to resentment and emotional exhaustion, eroding personal identity over time. Recognizing manipulation is the first step toward breaking free from its grip. This requires a high degree of self-awareness and emotional intelligence. It involves paying attention to feelings of guilt, confusion, or obligation that seem disproportionate to the situation. These emotional responses are often red flags signaling manipulative tactics at play. Once identified, it's crucial to validate one's emotions and experiences rather than accepting the manipulator's distorted version of reality. Setting boundaries is an essential strategy against manipulation. Boundaries communicate that while you are open to healthy interactions, you will not tolerate coercion or deception. This may involve assertively expressing your needs, declining unreasonable demands, or distancing yourself from the manipulator. It's important to remember that boundaries are not about controlling the other person, but about protecting your own emotional and psychological well-being. Confronting a manipulator requires courage and a clear understanding of their tactics. It's crucial to stay calm and focused, avoiding emotional reactions that could be used against you. Stick to facts and express your thoughts clearly without getting entangled in circular arguments designed to confuse or exhaust you. In some cases, the most effective response is to disengage entirely, particularly if the manipulator refuses to acknowledge or change their behavior. Manipulation thrives in environments where open communication is stifled and accountability is absent. Therefore, fostering transparent and honest interactions is a powerful antidote. Encouraging dialogues that respect differing perspectives and validating each other's emotions can dismantle the manipulator's control tactics. In professional settings, this means creating a culture of feedback and accountability where decisions are made through collaboration rather than covert influence. It's essential to understand that refusing manipulation is not about becoming cynical or distrusting others. Rather, it's about developing the discernment to differentiate between genuine influence and deceitful coercion. It's about reclaiming one's autonomy and asserting the right to make informed choices without fear of emotional repercussions. Ultimately, the decision to reject manipulation is an affirmation of one's worth and integrity. It's about honoring your values, emotions, and perceptions, even when others attempt to undermine them. It's about saying, I see through your tactics and I choose to stand firm in my truth. By refusing to accept manipulation, you not only protect your own well-being, but also set a standard of respect and honesty for all your relationships. Neglect is a silent yet potent form of harm that often goes unnoticed because it involves inaction rather than overt actions. It is the absence of care, attention, and emotional support, leaving a void that can be just as damaging as active abuse. Unlike physical or verbal aggression, neglect is subtle, making it difficult to identify and confront. It creeps in slowly, manifesting as emotional distance, unfulfilled promises, or simply a lack of presence. But its effects are profound, affecting one's sense of worth, security, and connection. Neglect is particularly damaging because it communicates a powerful message that you are insignificant, unworthy of time and effort. This message is not always conveyed through harsh words or actions, but through indifference and apathy. When someone consistently fails to acknowledge your needs, feelings, or achievements, it can lead to feelings of invisibility and rejection. This is especially painful in close relationships, such as with parents, partners, or close friends, where emotional bonds are expected to be nurturing and supportive. In childhood, neglect can have long-lasting consequences. Children rely on caregivers for emotional validation and a sense of security. When these needs are unmet, they may grow up feeling unimportant or undeserving of love. Emotional neglect in particular is damaging because it is often invisible. A child who is well-fed and clothed but emotionally ignored can suffer just as much as one who is actively abused. They may internalize the neglect, believing that their feelings don't matter or that they are inherently unlovable. This distorted self-perception often follows them into adulthood, affecting their self-esteem and relationships. Neglect is not limited to childhood. It occurs in adult relationships too. In romantic relationships, neglect manifests as emotional unavailability, lack of communication, or failure to prioritize the partnership. One partner may feel alone even when physically together because their emotional needs are consistently ignored. This creates a disconnect, leading to feelings of loneliness, frustration, and resentment. Over time, emotional neglect can erode the very foundation of trust and intimacy, resulting in emotional withdrawal or even infidelity as one seeks validation elsewhere. In friendships, neglect may not be as intense, but is equally impactful. When one friend consistently makes time for others, but not for you, or when they only reach out when they need something, it signals that the relationship is one-sided. This creates an imbalance, making the neglected person feel undervalued and unimportant. It is crucial to recognize this pattern early on to avoid investing in relationships where respect and effort are not reciprocated. Workplace neglect is another form that is often overlooked. It occurs when an employee's efforts go unrecognized, when feedback is consistently absent, or when opportunities for growth and development are denied without explanation. Such neglect not only hinders career progression, but also affects morale and self-esteem. Employees who feel neglected may become disengaged, leading to decreased productivity and job satisfaction. Neglect is particularly harmful because it is ambiguous. Unlike overt abuse, which is easily identifiable, neglect involves what isn't there: care, attention, and validation. This ambiguity makes it challenging for the victim to articulate their pain. They may feel guilty for feeling hurt, believing they are overreacting or being too sensitive. This self-doubt compounds the emotional damage, leading to internalized feelings of inadequacy and worthlessness. Breaking free from the effects of neglect requires self-awareness and courage. It involves recognizing that your needs are legitimate and that you deserve attention and care. It also requires setting boundaries, which means communicating your needs clearly and refusing to accept indifference. This can be difficult, especially when dealing with loved ones, but it is essential for emotional well-being. Healing from neglect involves seeking environments where you are valued and acknowledged. This might mean nurturing relationships with people who genuinely care, seeking therapy to rebuild self-worth, or pursuing passions that provide a sense of purpose and fulfillment. It also involves letting go of the hope that neglectful individuals will change, accepting that their behavior reflects their limitations, not your worth. Ultimately, refusing to accept neglect is about reclaiming your sense of self. It's about recognizing that you deserve love, attention, and respect simply because you exist. It's about refusing to be invisible and asserting your presence in the world. By standing up against neglect, you affirm your worth and demand the dignity you inherently deserve. Abuse is a deliberate act of harm that undermines a person's dignity, security, and well-being. It is an exertion of power and control intended to manipulate, intimidate, or dominate another person. Unlike misunderstandings or conflicts, abuse is intentional and repetitive, creating an environment of fear, dependence, and helplessness. It is not limited to physical violence, but includes emotional, verbal, financial, and even digital forms of harm. Regardless of its manifestation, abuse leaves deep psychological scars, affecting a person's sense of identity, self-worth, and ability to trust. One of the most insidious aspects of abuse is its gradual nature. It rarely begins with overt aggression. Instead, it often starts subtly: small criticisms, minor jealousies, or seemingly harmless jokes at one's expense. Over time, these behaviors escalate, becoming more frequent and severe. This slow progression makes it difficult for the victim to recognize the pattern, as they may rationalize the behavior or blame themselves for provoking it. The abuser may even alternate between cruelty and affection, creating confusion and making the victim hope that the good moments indicate genuine love or remorse. Emotional abuse is particularly damaging because it attacks a person's psyche. It involves manipulation, gaslighting, humiliation, and constant criticism. The abuser systematically breaks down the victim's confidence, making them doubt their perceptions and judgments. Gaslighting, for instance, is a tactic where the abuser denies reality, making the victim question their sanity. They might say, "You're too sensitive," or "That never happened," causing the victim to become increasingly dependent on the abuser's version of events. This creates a cycle of control, where the victim loses trust in themselves and becomes trapped in the abuser's narrative. Verbal abuse, a subset of emotional abuse, includes name-calling, yelling, and constant belittling. It is intended to degrade the victim's self-esteem and instill a sense of worthlessness. Statements like, "You'll never be good enough," or no one else would want you are designed to isolate the victim, making them feel that they are unworthy of love or respect. Over time, these words become internalized, shaping the victim's self-precision and reinforcing their dependence on the abuser. Physical abuse, though more visible, is not limited to hitting or violence. It includes threats of harm, intimidation, and even destruction of property to instill fear and submission. Physical abuse is often accompanied by emotional manipulation, as the abuser might apologize profusely afterward, promising to change or blaming external factors like stress or alcohol. This manipulation makes the victim believe that the abuse is a one-time occurrence or that they can somehow fix the situation by changing their behavior. This false hope traps them in a cycle of abuse and reconciliation. Financial abuse is another powerful method of control. It involves restricting the victim's access to money, sabotaging their employment, or placing them on an allowance to limit their independence. By controlling the victim's financial resources, the abuser ensures that leaving becomes nearly impossible. This form of abuse is particularly common in domestic relationships where one partner is financially dependent on the other, creating a power imbalance that the abuser exploits to maintain control. Abuse also extends into the digital realm, especially in today's technology-driven world. Digital abuse involves monitoring communications, demanding access to social media accounts, or using location tracking to control the victim's movements. It may also include public shaming or cyberbullying to humiliate the victim and damage their reputation. Digital abuse is often underestimated, but its impact is profound as it invades the victim's privacy and perpetuates control even from a distance. Breaking free from abuse is challenging because of the emotional, financial, and psychological dependence it creates. Victims often feel trapped, isolated, and powerless, believing that they have no alternatives. This is compounded by the stigma and shame associated with abuse, making them reluctant to seek help or share their experiences. They may also fear retaliation or judgment, leading them to suffer in silence. However, it is crucial to understand that abuse is never justified, regardless of the circumstances or provocations. No one deserves to be mistreated, humiliated, or controlled. Recognizing the signs of abuse is the first step toward breaking the cycle. This involves acknowledging the reality of the situation, seeking support from trusted individuals, and reaching out to professional resources such as counselors, support groups, or legal assistance. Leaving an abusive situation requires courage and a strong support system. It involves rebuilding self-esteem, challenging the distorted narratives imposed by the abuser, and rediscovering one's autonomy. This journey is difficult but essential for healing and reclaiming one's identity. It's about recognizing that self-worth is not defined by how others treat you, but by your inherent dignity as a human being. Ultimately, refusing to accept abuse is an act of self-respect and empowerment. It's about breaking free from the cycle of control and manipulation to live authentically and without fear. It's about standing up and saying, "I deserve to be treated with respect and dignity." By doing so, survivors not only reclaim their lives, but also inspire others to recognize and resist abuse, creating a world where dignity and respect are non-negotiable. Unreasonable expectations are demands or standards placed on someone that are unrealistic, unfair, or impossible to meet. They set a bar so high that no matter how much effort is made, the person on the receiving end is destined to fail or feel inadequate. These expectations can come from parents, partners, friends, employers, or even oneself. They are often disguised as motivation or encouragement, but in reality, they create pressure, stress, and a constant sense of failure. Over time, they can damage self-esteem, strain relationships, and lead to burnout or emotional exhaustion. One of the most damaging aspects of unreasonable expectations is their impact on self-worth. When someone is constantly told they are not good enough, regardless of how much they achieve, they begin to internalize this message. They start to believe that they are inherently flawed or inadequate. This is particularly harmful when these expectations come from authority figures like parents or employers. A child who is constantly pressured to achieve perfect grades or excel in every area of life grows up feeling that their worth is tied to their achievements. Similarly, an employee who is never praised but only criticized for not meeting impossible targets becomes demoralized and disengaged. In relationships, unreasonable expectations can create resentment and tension. A partner who expects constant attention, perfection, or emotional fulfillment is placing an unrealistic burden on the other. No one can meet all of another person's needs or be perfect all the time. These demands create a dynamic where the other partner feels like they are always falling short, leading to feelings of inadequacy and frustration. It also creates an unhealthy power imbalance as the person setting the expectations positions themselves as superior or more deserving. Unreasonable expectations are often rooted in comparison and idealization. Social media has exacerbated this problem by creating unrealistic standards of success, beauty, and happiness. People compare themselves to curated images of perfection and then set similar expectations for themselves and others. This not only leads to feelings of inadequacy, but also puts pressure on relationships as people expect their partners or friends to live up to these idealized standards. When reality doesn't match these fantasies, disappointment and conflict arise. Parents, too, can burden their children with unreasonable expectations, often as a reflection of their own unfulfilled dreams or societal pressures. They may demand academic excellence, athletic achievements, or a specific career path without considering the child's interests, abilities, or emotional well-being. This can lead to burnout, anxiety, and a loss of self-identity as the child feels pressured to conform to someone else's vision of success. In extreme cases, this pressure can lead to mental health issues like depression or anxiety disorders. In the workplace, unreasonable expectations manifest as excessive workloads, unrealistic deadlines, or constant availability. Employees are expected to be productive at all times, sacrificing personal well-being for professional success. This is particularly true in competitive industries where burnout is normalized and work-life balance is dismissed as laziness. The constant pressure to perform at an unsustainable level leads to stress, fatigue, and eventually burnout. It also creates a toxic work environment where employees feel undervalued and disposable. Unreasonable expectations are not always imposed by others. Sometimes they come from within. Perfectionists, for example, set impossibly high standards for themselves, believing that anything less than flawless is failure. They push themselves to exhaustion, constantly striving for an ideal that is unattainable. This self-imposed pressure not only affects their mental health, but also their relationships, as they may project these expectations onto others, becoming overly critical or controlling. Breaking free from the cycle of unreasonable expectations requires self-awareness and assertiveness. It involves recognizing when expectations are unrealistic and communicating boundaries clearly and respectfully. For example, an employee might need to negotiate deadlines or ask for additional resources, rather than silently struggling to meet impossible demands. In relationships, it involves honest conversations about needs and limitations, ensuring that both parties have realistic and balanced expectations. Setting healthy boundaries is crucial in resisting unreasonable expectations. This means recognizing your own limits and refusing to accept demands that compromise your well-being. It's about giving yourself permission to be imperfect and allowing others the same grace. This doesn't mean settling for mediocrity, but rather striving for excellence without sacrificing mental and emotional health. It's about finding a balance between ambition and self-compassion. It is also important to challenge the underlying beliefs that fuel unreasonable expectations, such as the notion that worth is tied to achievement or that perfection is attainable. This requires shifting focus from external validation to internal fulfillment. It means celebrating progress rather than perfection and valuing effort and learning over flawless outcomes. In relationships, it involves accepting that no one is perfect and that love is about supporting each other's growth, not demanding flawlessness. Ultimately, refusing to accept unreasonable expectations is an act of self. It's about asserting the right to be human, to have limitations, and to be valued for who you are, not just for what you achieve. It's about rejecting the pressure to conform to unrealistic standards and embracing authenticity. By doing so, you not only protect your own well-being, but also create healthier, more balanced relationships and environments where people are valued for their true selves.